Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Andy Woods. This is Pastor's Point of View. Actually, Brother Jim, this is number 143 for us. Can you believe that? Today is November 6th, 2020. We are continuing to reel, not so much from the election, but what people have done in light of the election or as a response to the election. And so we have entitled this America on the Brink. And my name is Dr. Andy Woods. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I'm back with my friend, colleague, fellow elder, associate pastor, Dr. Jim McGowan. And, well, I don't really know how to kind of segue into this except just to jump right into it. Here is our outline that we're going to be using throughout. About 7 things to deal with, and the first thing is an introduction. And one of the things that did not happen on Tuesday, which was November 3rd, which was our big national election, is the red wave never happened.
Right.
It looks like the Republicans are going to continue to hold the Senate. It looks like they held their own in the House of Representatives, and that's a big deal, regardless of what happens to the presidential contest, for the simple reason that all of the structural changes that they were threatening to make, they can't make them like they wanted to. Things like that they were talking about court packing, things like giving statehood to Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, things like changing the Electoral College, and things like taxing us out of the solar system in the middle of an economic recovery. It's going to be harder for them to get those things done. However, something very significant, as most people are aware of, has happened in the presidential election. And let's start off just by reading this quote from Donald Trump. This is what he said in the wee hours of the morning on November 4th, just a few hours after it looked like the election results were coming in, and they stopped the count in certain swing states. And what did Donald Trump say there?
Yeah, and before I read that,
please,
let me just very quickly say, go back and review what Andy just said about the positives that we still have in place. Because there's a tendency right now for us to think only negatively.
Right.
So God is still working. But here is the article. 11/4/20, Donald Trump. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We are getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud on our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we will be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. To me, there's a very sad moment. We will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it.
Okay, now he said something very significant, or a lot of things very significant there. Number one, he said we won this already. Number 2, he said this stop of the count, and which we'll explain in a minute, is an embarrassment to our country. Third world countries act this way. Banana republics act this way, not the United States of America. And then the third thing he said is this is a fraud on the American public. And actually the fourth thing he said is this is a big moment. The fifth thing is this is a sad moment. So what we believe, along with Donald Trump, is happening right now to the presidential race is an effectual coup d'etat.
Yes.
And I don't think it helps us to sweep things under the rug and pretend like what's happening is not actually happening.
Right.
This is a coup d'etat, and it's happening right in the middle of your country. And what's happening is there's an overthrow of the will of the American people. And what is at stake in something like this, and this is why he keeps saying big moment, sad moment, is electoral integrity.
Yes, yes.
And if people can't go to the polls and expect the system to promote electoral integrity, if you can't have a clean election, then we're just a banana republic.
That's right.
We're no different than any other tin pot, dictatorship around the world. So having said all that, let me explain why the elites have to get rid of Donald Trump one way or the other. Before we explain the election fraud that's going on, why do they have to get rid of Donald Trump? Well, let me just back up a little bit so we can see the big picture over the course of the last 4 years. Donald Trump's very presence in the Oval Office was unearthing corruption.
Absolutely.
So if Donald Trump was not in the office, we wouldn't know anything about the Obama administration spying on his campaign. We wouldn't know about the phony dossier, the fake FISA court application. All of those things we wouldn't even know about without him in the office, Oval Office. So his very presence there on issue after issue after issue is exposing a level of integrity and degradation that I personally thought impossible for our so-called free country.
And has existed for a long time, apparently.
Yes, exactly right. Number two, Donald Trump's existence in the Oval Office is throwing a monkey wrench on the New World Order. And that's how to tie this in prophetically. We know that there's an ambition on the part of Satan to bring in world government, and Donald Trump has done the exact opposite of what the New World Order wants. Examples include taking America out of the Paris Climate Accord.
Yes.
Taking America out of the ripoff, which was called the Iran deal. Passing an executive order saying no more money for any branch of government that is indoctrinating people into the concept of systemic racism. In other words, you go to these seminars and you have to go to keep your job.
Right.
And what you learn is America is evil and racist at its core. Well, Trump said if you want to do that kind of thing, no more dinero, no more money for you. I mean, that's right in the face of the New World Order. He has rebuilt the American economy to unprecedented levels, not just once. I mean, the economy was humming along.
Yes.
At unprecedented levels prior to this pandemic, but he's actually doing it a second time,
which is astounding.
Astounding. The economy's in full recovery. He put his finger in the face of the New World Order by wanting to build, and to a large extent succeeding in many fronts, a wall around the United States of America, and he has remade the judiciary. Because the Democrats got rid of the filibuster rule, he took advantage of that and has literally remade the American judiciary into a conservative, constitutionalist judiciary. Picks like Amy Coney Barrett to the highest court in the land, which is his third Supreme Court pick that made it through. And the fact of the matter is the New World Order folks and the elites, they can't have 4 more years of this. So the name of the game is to take this guy down any way you can do it. And what they really want to do is they want to install as the next president Kamala Harris. Everybody knows that Joseph Biden is a feckle, senile old man that doesn't have the mental acuity or the physical stamina to be in that office. And via the 25th Amendment or something like that, he will be quickly replaced by Kamala Harris, who is nothing more than a Manchurian candidate.
Yeah, that's a great
a puppet of the globalists. By the way, someone who finished 16th in the Democratic field in the primaries. And so when you think of President Biden, don't think of President Biden, think of President Kamala Harris. By the way, I'm sick and tired of people saying we got to stand up for blacks. She's not black.
That's right.
Okay? She's Jamaican.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason I bring that up is everybody is so race conscious. I want to dispel that one. I don't care if someone is white or black. Clarence Thomas, I think, is an outstanding Supreme Court justice and has nothing to do with the man's skin color. And so what has happened over the course of the last 4 years, and you have to understand, Brother Jim, I wasn't in prior PPOVs will verify this. I was not exactly a Trumpist early on.
No, neither of us were.
Neither were you. I think both of us sort of reluctantly voted for him
That's
because he was better than the alternative.
Yeah.
And having seen what this man has gone through over the last 4 years, I mean, I have turned into the opposite of what I once was.
Yeah.
I'm no longer a Trump skeptic, but I am a Trump acolyte.
He's proven himself.
He's proven himself. And the reason I think that way, I don't agree with every little nook and cranny, obviously.
Sure.
But there hasn't been a man that has had more thrown at him over the course of the last 4 years than Donald Trump. Examples include the Russia hoax. You know, Russia is interfering with the election. Now, nobody cares about the Democratic Party interfering with the election today, but Russia was interfering with the election. Relentless attacks on the man as being a racist, when the fact of the matter is, if you look at his private business dealings, he hires blacks, Hispanics, women, people of minority status constantly. The phony impeachment, where there was absolutely no underlying crime according to what the Constitution calls for. The plandemic, the communist China virus that originated in Wuhan. And the latest thing is these phony polls. I mean, all of these polls ended up being completely wrong, and they were designed to do one thing, which was to suppress Republican vote. And the polls are not done by scientists, these polls. They were done by political activists. And now what has happened is the latest thing has been thrown at him. And this is probably the last resort of the elites or the New World Order, which is voter fraud. So I went to bed, Brother Jim, Tuesday evening. And I'm reading here from the Associated Press. And this was what was showing up on my television screen. And I'm going to read the counts in all of these swing states that are now being rewritten and altered as I speak. This is what the counts read Tuesday night. Georgia, swing state, 16 electoral votes. 94% of the votes in. 48.3% for Biden, 50.5% for Trump. So he won Georgia. Next swing state, Michigan, 16 electoral votes, 75% reporting, meaning it's a gap of such significance that the other side couldn't catch up legally. 45.8% for Biden, 52.6% for Trump. Number 3, North Carolina, 15 electoral votes, 94% of the votes in, 48.7% for Biden, 50.1% for Trump. Next is Pennsylvania. We're going to have a lot to say about Pennsylvania today. 20 electoral votes, 64% reporting, 43.1% for Biden, 55.7% for Donald Trump. Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes, 94% reporting, 47.4% for Biden, 51.1% for Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump says, frankly, we won the election, he did. And then after I'd gone to bed, I don't know, it was maybe 10:30, 11, suddenly you wake up the next morning and you learn that mysteriously in the midst of the night, the voting was stopped. And you have a situation in place now where we can't let things continue on as they were in these largely democratically controlled localities. We now have to start inventing votes. And that's exactly what's happening. A magic wand is being waved, and suddenly Biden is making up all of this ground through votes that are coming in a fraudulent way. And that was the only way to stop Donald Trump, who in my opinion, rightfully and fairly won the election. So we have this quote here from Joseph Stalin, who says what? And I'm doing most of the talking. Feel free to
Well, I'm
dive
going to have
in
plenty of
whenever,
opportunity, I
whenever
know.
whatever you'd like.
Well, what did Joseph Stalin, that bastion of faith and goodness, say? It's not who votes that counts. It's who counts the votes.
Yeah. So it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. And in all of these blue states that are bringing in these new totals, that's what's happening. Votes are being manufactured, as we're going to demonstrate today. And such a practice, Brother Jim, is an abomination to God. You don't have to look very far.
That's right.
In the Bible to see that the God of the Bible detests unfair weights and measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And what is just of one of many verses we could read? What does Proverbs 20, chapter 20, verse 10 say?
Proverbs 20:10, differing weights and differing measures, both of them are abominable to the Lord.
So as we describe some of these fraudulent voting practices going on in these blue states, I hope people will keep this in mind. And I hope they will also keep in mind Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, which gives us a command in the church age. What does it say there?
Ephesians 5:11, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them.
So we're called to not only not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, we are called by God to turn the searchlight of truth on these unfruitful deeds and expose them for what they are. Now, that's not hard to do, as we're going to show you in this issue of voting fraud, to undo a national election. And I'm wondering why more of my pastor friends out there who have far bigger spheres of influence than we have, and far bigger pulpits and far bigger churches aren't doing this.
It's because of the word big and bigger you just used.
Yes.
And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I heard one big name pastor, and if I called his name, everybody would know who I'm talking about. He's quoting recently Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, don't take a position on this election. Don't be too bold in exposing darkness, because we're going to alienate people from Christ, because they're going to confuse partisanship with Christianity.
Yeah.
To me, that's like in the middle of fighting the Nazis in World War II, saying, blessed are the peacemakers.
Yes.
And to me, it's a lot like telling the people that were standing against Britain in the Revolutionary War, blessed are the peacemakers.
Yeah.
That is the wrong passage to quote. Now, we get the fact that we're supposed to be polite and congenial and spirit-filled and have fruit of the Spirit and not come across as hostile and angry. We get that. But at some point, you've also got to factor in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11.
Yes.
Blessed are the peacemakers is dealing with relationships between two people, largely within the confines of the believing community. It's got nothing to do with exposing election fraud.
Right.
And so it's very disturbing to me to watch evangelicals become, well, we quoted Stalin earlier, what Stalin called useful idiots, helping the cause.
Yeah, it's effectively changing the word of God, if I can just make a comment quickly.
Please.
Proverbs 20:10 uses the word abominable.
Yes.
It doesn't say it's not nice.
That's right.
It says abominable.
That's right.
See, and so we are changing God's word when we're looking at these situations and saying, oh, well, differing weights, differing measures. It's not nice, but, we need to be peacemakers.
Yes, that's exactly right. So how are we going to back up our claim that what is happening right now is a coup d'etat? How can we back up our claim that the name of the game is to change the narrative and to make it look like Donald Trump is the sore loser? He's not standing up for the Constitution. He's a sore loser, and he has to acquiesce power, because that's what's happening.
That's right.
Is the narrative is being changed, and the narrative is being changed through voter fraud. So how do we back this up that this is an actual coup d'etat? Well, let's look at a few states where these recounts, so to speak, I don't know if they're recounts, they're initial counts, are now in full swing. Remember what Trump warned about back on November 4th, we don't want any of them to find any ballot at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
That's prophetic.
That's prophetic. That's the kind of thing that's actually happening. So Michigan, one of the swing states of the several that we read about earlier, the governor is Gretchen Whitmer. Now, we've mentioned her many times on our program in the past. She's acted like a Jezebelian dictator in the midst of this whole pandemic and trampled down people's rights in an unprecedented way. Probably the only governor in the state, the union, that's done worse is the governor of California, Newsom. And so what is happening in Michigan as I speak is exemplary of what's happening in these other states.
Yeah.
The other states being Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So if we described all the voter fraud and everything we know, this show would go on, for 24 hours. But we're just giving a few highlights of it. And so we have something that happened at 4 o'clock in the morning. Didn't Trump mention there?
I said it was prophetic, right?
Mentioned 4 o'clock in the morning. It's from the Gateway Pundit. The title of the article is "Watch, Suitcases and Coolers Rolled into Detroit Voting Center at 4 a.m., Brought into a secure counting area." This is by Cassandra Fairbanks, November 4th, 2020. What does that article say?
A poll watcher filmed highly suspicious activity at a vote counting center in Detroit at 4 a.m. the morning after Election Day. In the footage taken by Kelly, I believe it's Sorelli, I guess, a Texas lawyer and member of Lawyers for Trump, a person in a white van was filmed loading up a red wagon outside the ballot counting location and bringing it in instead. It says the report continues on to say that according to Sorelli, visitors were able to enter and leave the facility where the votes are being counted without any identification check. The workers were apparently in 6-hour shifts, meaning that they did not have a need for overnight luggage.
So here is this Trump lawyer, Kelly, I guess you pronounce it Sorelli, and she is dispatched to Michigan to monitor this vote count. She's basically told, okay, you can go to bed now because nothing's going to happen till the morning. And she was a bit suspicious of that, and so she was out there ready to go with her video on her phone. At 4 a.m., all of these boxes and wagons and things start getting pulled in to this voting area with no monitoring whatsoever. And in fact, you can find footage online of this happening and her filming it. Now, somebody sent me this concerning her. Apparently, she is a believer, and she was asking for prayer. This is what was sent to me. I'm asking for prayers for Granbury's Kelly Sorelli. She is an attorney on the Trump legal team and was sent to Michigan to watch the count amidst concerns. Last night, they were all told to go ahead and leave for the night because Trump was already winning. She got suspicious and hung back with her camera and waited. Appreciate her wisdom, by the way.
God.
Later last night, cars started pulling up with luggage and ice. In fact, I think we have some pictures of it online of this very thing happening. This was what was captured on video. She got suspicious and hung back with her camera and waited. Later last night, cars pulled up with luggage and ice and chests full of illegal ballots. She is now a witness for Michigan Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court. She is seeing this through, but is terrified. She has been assigned a security detail. Please pray for her peace and protection through this time. This is wrong on every level. And this correspondence to me goes on and says this was simultaneously happening there in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and just to make a
Please.
clarification there, they weren't bringing in ice because they needed drinks. They were bringing in ice chests
There you go.
full of something.
And continuing on with Michigan, we have this quote from the Gateway Pundit in an article by Joe Hoft, November 5th, 2020. Michigan poll watcher, ballots were turned in with no names on them. So what does that little brief sentence say?
Yeah, this morning it's reported that in Michigan, votes were turned in with no name on them. Was this what was in the boxes carried into the Detroit poll counting area on Monday night?
So votes come in illegally and with no name on them at 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, is this a free and fair election? I mean, obviously not if this kind of thing is going on. In fact, here's a screenshot from Mark Dice, and it's from his Twitter feed, and you can actually go to his Twitter feed and watch his video, live video there, and it says ballots have been turned in with no names on them.
That's scary.
And you got a few poll watchers there, complaining. Now, here's the thing, Brother Jim, of all the things I've seen that really disturbs me the most, not just in Michigan, but everywhere, it's the blockading of the windows.
Yes.
So poll watchers cannot see the process of the supposed count.
I've never heard of this kind of thing happening in an election before.
No, it's absolute insanity. In fact, here is a screenshot from a Twitter feed by Mark Finn, and it's described the scene at the Detroit's absentee ballot counting center is growing more heated. The windows are now being covered up, allegations of violations. Secretary of State says she welcomes the challenges. What kind of law enforcement agent is that? But you'll notice here this article from Breitbart, Kyle Olson, November 4th, 2020. The title of it is Watch Detroit Absentee Ballot Counting Chaos as Workers Block Windows and Bar Observers. What does that article say?
Absentee ballot counting in Detroit descended into chaos on Wednesday when hundreds of unofficial Republican observers concerned about fraud converged on the counting location. The city of Detroit is using the TCF Center, formerly Cobo Hall, to count all of the absentee ballots in the city. Republicans and Trump supporters grew alarmed as Trump was holding a strong lead in the state during early counting Tuesday evening, only for it to evaporate as mailed-in ballots were counted in historically Democrat areas. I might just make a side comment.
Please.
Who was it that was saying that this potential for mail-in voter fraud would be an issue?
Wow.
It was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Continuing the article, several videos posted on social media show workers attempting to restrict transparency and not allow people outside to observe what was going on inside the counting area. Matt Finn, a Fox News producer, wrote, quoting, "Some of the windows remained blocked off. I asked a few people who taped them up and why. No clear answer," close quote. A worker used large pieces of cardboard to cover the windows, preventing those outside from seeing what was going on. Other workers used pizza boxes to block the door windows as some chanted, quote, "Stop the vote," close quote, outside the venue. Other videos showed Detroit police protecting the doors, preventing observers from entering. As tension grew, a representative of the Detroit Health Department sought to clear the lobby of the counting area, further angering the watchers. With 99% of the vote counted, Biden leads Trump by more than 60,000 votes, according to the Detroit News.
Now, I think that count has changed in Biden's favor, thanks to all of these shenanigans. Here is a screenshot from Stephen Patterson's Twitter feed. It's describing the same building where this blocking of the windows was going on. He says, large animated crush of Stop the Count protesters trying to push their way into this particular hall in Detroit. where the ballots are being counted. They're blocked by guards at the door. Pizza boxes are pushed up against the window to obstruct view. It's tense, and you can see the blockade of the door of people wanting to go in and observe just by going to his Twitter feed and watching this little homemade video that they made of it.
It's interesting that they're calling them protesters.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, I would like to think, Brother Jim, that if the shoe was on the other foot and it was the Republicans doing this, that we would have enough conviction and moral clarity to speak out against that as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm of the persuasion that there are enough Democrats of goodwill.
Mm-hmm. There's somewhere.
There's somewhere. We might have to look long and hard to find them. But I know that at the bottom of your soul and heart, this doesn't sit right with you.
Yeah.
Because this is just plain cheating.
It is.
And I can't see, for the life of me, Brother Jim, any explanation whatsoever in blockading windows so people can't see what's going on. Mm-hmm. Can you think of any justification for that?
Well, it's a win-at-all-cost mentality.
Yeah. Now, the Bible is very clear about deeds done in darkness, isn't it?
It is.
And these are some verses that occurred to me. One of them is John 3:19 through 21.
All right, John 3:19 through 21. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought in God.
So if someone is doing something in the darkness, they're hiding something.
Yes.
And I don't know how else to think about this concept of blocking windows where neutral observers or even people on the other side can't see the process that's taking place.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they're blocking the windows, to me, very clearly indicates something not so good is happening there.
It sure seems that way.
And I'm reminded, Brother Jim, of Revelation 21, verse 18, which describes the eternal city.
Yeah.
And the New Jerusalem, which will occur in the last 2 chapters of the Bible. And it specifically said that city will be like clear glass.
It does say that.
And I've always thought, why is it like clear glass? Because there's no sin and there's nothing to hide.
Nothing to hide.
So there's no need to blockade the windows.
Don't need any pizza boxes.
And so it always bothers me when people are doing things in secret, in clandestine. And that's what's happening in Detroit. That's right. That's what's happening in Detroit. So, continuing on here with Michigan, we have a situation, Brother Jim, where people that are 120 years old are voting. Here's an article from Summit News, and it's by Paul Joseph Watson, November 5th, 2020. Trump supporters question why absentee ballots were filed for people up to 120 years old. Mm-hmm. How long has this been going on? What does that article say?
Yeah, boy, oh boy. Trump supporters are questioning why absentee ballot voters in the swing state of Michigan were apparently sent in by people aged up to 120 years old. On election night, President Trump was ahead in Michigan, but his lead was wiped out after huge numbers of late mail-in ballots went to Biden. In addition to numerous other claims of vote fraud, attention is now focused on why people who are almost certainly dead had ballots filed in their name. Trump supporter Austin Fletcher posted screenshots of the information from Michigan's voter database.
And here is from the Twitter feed of Essential Fleckus, I guess is how you say that. And he's got screenshots of these 120-year-olds voting, people long dead that suddenly are voting.
Yeah.
And he writes, turns out 118-year-old William Bradley voted via absentee ballot in Wayne County, Michigan. William Bradley died in 1984. How long has this been going on? Try it for yourself, he writes.
There's a whole lot of resurrection going on.
That's right. And here is Corey Bernardi's Twitter feed, and he writes, "Good to see these 7 active Michigan voters are older than the oldest person alive. Heck, one of them was born in 1850."
Wow.
And he sarcastically writes, "Happy 170th birthday."
You can't make this stuff up.
No. And there he's got the names of the people.
Yeah.
And supposedly someone voted that was born in 1900, 2 in 1900, actually 3 or 4 in 1900, another one in 1902, another one in 1901, and another one voted via absentee ballot that was born in 1850.
That's some motivated voters.
Yeah, I would say so. And we also have this article here from projectveritas.com, November 4th, 2020. And it's very interesting. He's got it on interview.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to his Twitter feed and watch it.
I actually did.
And it masquerades the voice because the poor guy didn't want to lose his job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an insider, I guess, at the post office.
Yeah.
And it says, Michigan USPS insider delivers testimony of shady postmark scheme to hand stamp November 3rd on late ballots.
Wow.
And he calls on other post office workers, if they say anything shady, to report it. Michigan law forbids votes past 8 p.m. on election day. So if you got votes coming in post November 3rd, 8 p.m., just go ahead and change the hand stamp and make it sound like it still came in on time.
Yeah, we don't care about the law.
Right. So what does that article say?
All right. A U.S. Postal Service insider told Project Veritas founder and CEO James O'Keefe his supervisor instructed mail carriers at his work site here that all new ballot envelopes should be segregated in bins so that postal clerks could fraudulently hand postmark them as received November 3rd. The insider said he was shocked when Barlow Branch morning supervisor Jonathan Clark told a group of mail carriers how late ballots would be handled. Michigan law states that ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day, November 3rd, to be counted. This deadline was affirmed by the Michigan Court of Appeals, quoting, "Mail-in ballots are always a problem because there is no chain of custody between voter and the actual ballot box," close quote, O'Keefe said. The insider said there was a process set up for the post office workers involved in the bogus postmark scheme. Quoting, "We were told to collect any ballots that we find in mailboxes, collection boxes, etc. for outgoing mail at the end of the day. We're supposed to separate them from the standard letter mail so they can hand stamp them with yesterday's date and put them through the express mail system to get wherever they need to go," the insider said. Going on, "For clarification, today is the 4th of November, he said. James O'Keefe says, "Hand stamp them with November 3rd's date?" And the response is from the insider, "Yes." O'Keefe says, "That seems wrong." Let me just pause for a minute. That seems wrong. The USPS insider says, "Yeah, that's why I'm coming forward with this information. That is a very shady, in addition to, as far as I am aware, we're not supposed to be counting ballots that are postmarked after the 3rd of November here in the state of Michigan. Michigan and its 16 electoral college votes are at the center of the tightly contested 2020 presidential election between President Donald J. Trump and Vice President Joseph R. Biden, Jr."
So this is how Michigan's miraculously created votes that erased Trump's lead with 75% reporting. Biden had 45.8%, Trump 52.6%. We've got to manufacture some votes. This is how they did it.
So this is what happens. You go to bed, election night, Trump's ahead,
Yeah.
and you wake up and he's not.
Exactly.
There it is.
And for clarification, today is November 3rd, O'Keefe asked this insider who he's interviewing. James O'Keefe says hand stamp them with November 3rd date. The Insider says yes. I would encourage people to go to his website, Veritas. What's the name of this?
Veritas
Tips, Project Veritas, and watch this interview. It's fascinating in a sad sense to watch. Here's another tweet from James O'Keefe's Twitter feed, who is uncovering this. He says, election fraud. Update at Project Veritas to release bombshell whistleblower story in Michigan tonight. Thousands of tips have flooded into our inbox over the last 24 hours, and we have teams in place following up with them accordingly. Keep them coming. In other words, what's being presented here is just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
I mean, these are the occasions that we know about.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that say for all of the other occasions and infractions that we don't know about? Well, let's move from Michigan and let's go to Pennsylvania, another one of those supposed or so-called swing states that we mentioned earlier. Keep in mind that with 64% reporting and 20 electoral college votes in play, we went to bed at night with Biden with a 43% of the votes and Trump almost at 56%. So how did they start making up this difference? Well, here is an article from LifeSite News, November 4th, 2020. The title of it is another enormous batch of 23,277 votes in Philly are recorded, all for Biden.
Wow.
538 has reported on its Twitter feed a statistically problematic 23,277 votes from Philadelphia being tallied in a batch, all for Biden. This is dated Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. Tell us about that article.
Following reports of enormous batches of votes being tallied for Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden in Wisconsin, more are being reported in Pennsylvania. 538, which identifies itself as providing data-driven news and analysis, has reported on its Twitter feed a statistically problematic 23,277 votes from Philadelphia, being tallied in a batch, all for Biden. Folks, hold on. The good part's coming.
Yes, I love
Election authorities have yet to provide a transparent explanation as to the origin of at least the first batch and how it is that apparently a local population, here it comes, of 23,000 voters, think about that, could be statistically expected to cast each of their votes for just one candidate.
So these votes come in from one batch, they call it, one locality. There's 23,277 votes and not a single Trump voter in the whole list.
Not one.
How does that happen, Brother Jim?
Well, I think we know how that happens.
Yeah, and I love what this LifeSite News article says. Election authorities have yet to provide a transparent explanation.
Like, duh.
As to the origin of at least the first batch and how it is apparently a local population of 23,000 voters could be statistically expected to cast each of their votes for just one candidate.
It's crazy.
In fact, here is actually a screenshot from 538, this batch in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, I believe it is, where this happened. And it says at the top there, 2 more batches of Pennsylvania were reported. And it says at the top there, 23,277 votes in Philadelphia, all for Biden. So that's what they themselves said. It's like, how many times can you be struck by lightning? There's got to be unfair play going on here, or else you're dealing with statistical, I wouldn't even say improbabilities, I would say statistical impossibilities.
Yes, I would too.
By the way, this is fresh in. This was what Rudolph Giuliani just put on his Twitter feed. We don't have it a screenshot of it. So this is just fresh in. I think Diamond and Silk retweeted this, and this is what Rudy Giuliani says. Rudy Giuliani, of course, is the guy as a prosecutor who busted up the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows criminal behavior.
He recognizes
when
it.
he sees it.
Yeah.
And he writes this, at least 21,000 dead people. Isn't that what we were just talking about in Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
At least 21,000 dead people on Pennsylvania voter rolls. Quote, 9,212 registrants have been dead for at least 5 years.
Wow.
At least 1,990 registrants have been dead for at least 10 years. And at least 197 registrants have been dead for at least 20 years. Close quote.
Wow.
And then, the Diamond and Silk, sort of go on there, stating, the obvious.
Yeah.
And so this is what is happening in Pennsylvania. And as if all of that is not bad enough in this swing state of Pennsylvania, we have this article from Life News written by Stephen Ertelt, November 5th, 2020. Philadelphia Election Center refuses to let Trump officials watch vote counting despite a court order.
Yeah.
So what does that article say?
Chaos is currently ensuing in the city of Philadelphia, where the election headquarters is refusing to allow Trump campaign officials to watch the vote counting process, despite a court order from a state's court permitting them to be 6 feet away from election workers tabulating the votes in order to monitor potential fraud.
So state law in Pennsylvania, not to mention a court order upholding state law, says you have to let poll watchers within 6 feet to watch what's going on.
Yeah.
And this group here that's counting these votes, and I use the word counting very loosely. And why is it all of these recounts, I don't know if I want to call it recounts, but counting after hours, how come they're so blue? I mean, how come Trump never seems to get ahead in any of them and seems to fall radically behind? It's kind of like the recount in, 2000, and all of the extra counting seemed to favor Al Gore very suspiciously.
Yeah.
And so again, shows you that monkey business is going on. But this group here, is going against state law, and they're going against a court order upholding state law and not letting poll watchers see what they're doing. Now, I just saw something on the news where the Trump administration lawyers got a favorable ruling, and they're allowed to go in and watch things. But my question is, well, what about all the prior votes?
How much damage has been done?
How much damage has already been done?
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit, too late. And this is what's happening to you, Mr. and Mrs. America. This election is being stolen right out from under you. This is a coup d'etat happening in your own country.
Yeah.
Let's move, Brother Jim, to Arizona. The reason I bring up Arizona is Arizona was called very, very early.
Yes, it was.
For Biden.
Yes.
And the reason that's significant is that's not a East Coast state. That's more towards the West Coast. That's on a different time zone.
Yep.
And when people see that state called so early and there's still an opportunity for them to vote, they just stay home.
Well, sure.
So I think this was largely done, by design. And even Nate Silver, who's considered to be sort of a guru in this area, and a lot of people have criticized him because his calculations lean more left than right. Even he says Arizona was called way too early. And what does Nate Silver say, or what did he post?
All right. He says, I don't know. I guess I'd say that Biden will win Arizona if you force me to pick, but I sure as heck don't think the state should have been called by anyone. And I think the calls that were previously made should be retracted now.
Now, he made that statement, this is timestamped, November 4th, 9:33 p.m. And sadly, quite sadly, one of the news outlets that everybody thinks is conservative that made this call is Fox News.
It is. That's right.
Now, I would encourage people to go back and watch Pastor's Point of View number 138, because we deal with Fox News and how on one of their shows the name George Soros came up by Newt Gingrich, a guest, and immediately the hosts, obviously taking orders through their earpiece, shut down the conversation immediately.
That's right.
It was, Pastor's Point of View number 138. And Newt Gingrich is sort of frustrated there, saying, well, then it's verboten, which is German for that it's forbidden, I guess.
We can't talk about that.
Yeah. So a lot of the things that Fox News has been doing lately, I don't think it's a conservative outlet anymore.
Well, I've been watching Fox News after this, and there have been many who have come and said, have criticized them for calling it so early. And the response that I've been getting from the correspondents has been very, very negative towards anyone that would challenge Fox News for doing that.
Yeah. That's
very interesting.
That is interesting. And it's not that there aren't good people on there. I have a high opinion for Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and to some extent Laura Ingraham and others that are conservative voices. But it seems to me that what they communicate is very different than what you get elsewhere on that network, particularly from shows that they have on there during the day. They seem very lopsided against Trump in favor of Biden. And in fact, Trump, you mentioned Trump making statements that seem prescient. He's made a number of statements against Fox News.
Yeah.
In fact, I was fascinated to watch this. One of the times he did it was when he was on one of their shows, and he started criticizing them. Yeah. And you could see how uneasy everybody was getting. Yeah. And so, anyway, that's Arizona. So we've done Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and now, Brother Jim, unless you have something else to say about those three states.
Let's rush right into this next topic.
And again, everything we've communicated concerning those states is exemplary, not exhaustive.
Yes.
These are all the swing states that Trump sure seemed like he won.
Sure did.
Tuesday night. They're all switching their numbers through these types of very nefarious practices. Yep. This is destroying the country in the sense that people are going to think, well, why even cast a vote if it's going to be, the process is this dirty and this unfair? I mean, if you cannot guarantee a clean election, do you have the right to call yourself a superpower anymore? I mean, it seems to me we've descended into the realm of being nothing more than a tin pot dictatorship, approaching the status of a third world country.
Well, it's time to throw light on all of this. And you know what happens when you go into a dark room in Texas during the summertime and you flip on a light? All the roaches start to scatter. It's time to step on the roaches.
That's exactly right.
That's what we need to do.
And one other thing, our state of Texas is a big state.
Yeah.
Did you notice how fast we got our vote calculation in? There was no hang up at all. Why is it that these little tiny cities and these little tiny localities in these little tiny states have to go day after day after day after day to do their counting? Well, the answer is they're not counting. They're injecting.
They're creating.
They're injecting or interjecting their preconceived outcome. Now, most people may be aware of some of the things we've communicated. I don't think most people are aware of Roman numeral 5 here, the hammer, or the scorecard, which is a piece of computer science with an application on it that allows the government to alter elections.
Yes.
And I have to be honest with you, until Monday, I was unaware that such a thing ever existed. The first person I heard this from was from Mike Spalding, Monday, one day before the election, on his show, Dr. Mike Live. And then I heard about it on Wednesday, one day after the election, by Brandon House of Worldview Weekend, as he interviewed a 3-star general. Doesn't that kind of a person have credibility in your eyes?
Yes.
Who testified to the reality of this device and the fact that it's been used in elections in the past and is probably being used right now.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't have a chance to listen to Brandon House's radio broadcast, let's say it would be November 4th, Wednesday, November 4th, with this 3-star general on with him and others, I would encourage people to listen to that. But anyway, we have this article from the No Q report called The Hammer Scorecard, and the title of the article is Democrats Colluding with CIA to Launch Intelligence Operation That Alters Voting Machine Results. And here's a report that's coming dated November 2nd, 2020.
All right. Dave Jonda of Operation Freedom at www.davejonda.com.
And let me just stop you right there. People can go and listen to that interview, which would go back a few months. But he talks about this device. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Says he has released a bombshell story with huge implications for Tuesday's elections. Janda's guest in his latest broadcast is a former high-level intelligence officer, Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, who warns that the Dems and the CIA have put in place a mechanism which can alter the voting results of electronic voting machines in key swing states like Pennsylvania that will determine the outcome of the election. This covert technology is called Operation Scorecard, and it was built by the CIA to surreptitiously steal elections in targeted countries. Now that technology is being turned against the United States of America and is about to be activated on Tuesday to steal the election for Biden, explains Jonda's guest. As McInerney explains, after the closing of polls in Pennsylvania and other swing states, and then altered using complex algorithms to alter the votes in a way that evades detection, handing a victory to the pre-designated winner, Joe Biden. In the interview, he explains that a covert app called Scorecard steals votes by making sure Democrats always stay about 3% ahead of their Republican rivals. Quoting, Scorecard steals the elections by tampering with the computers at the transfer points, close quote, he adds. This also explains why Joe Biden recently said with great clarity, quoting, "We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics," close quote. This might also help explain why Joe Biden told voters at a recent small rally that he didn't, quote, need their vote, close quote, to become president, and why Nancy Pelosi says Biden will win no matter what the votes say on November 3rd. The deep state has a plan in place to steal this election by altering votes in key swing states. And if Trump challenges the fraud, he will be condemned for, quote, refusing to accept the outcome, close quote, of the rigged election. This is the narrative trap that has been set by the treasonous mainstream media. Keep in mind that just over the last 2 days, Trump campaign officials were asking for detailed information about how voting machines are handled in Pennsylvania. According to the anti-Trump Washington Post, a deep state propaganda mouthpiece, the Trump campaign asked officials in Cumberland County for the names of people who transport ballots and voting machines once polls close. The names of the people who have access to the ballots afterward, and the precise locations where the ballots are stored, including room numbers. It seems that Trump's people are already aware that Dems are working to fraudulently steal this election by altering votes in Pennsylvania, and they're trying to stop it. Be aware that unless Trump receives an overwhelming wave of votes on Tuesday beyond the margin of Democrat fraud, the Dems have a mechanism in place to steal the election, condemn Trump for challenging the vote theft, and seizing control of the White House from this day forward.
Now, when I first heard of this, I just thought it was conspiracy wacko talk. And for the life of me, I hope my initial conviction was right. Because if this thing actually exists,
If this is true,
and these things are actually going on, I mean, we are in a world of trouble here in the United States. And apparently, according to this article, this was developed by the CIA to steal elections in targeted countries. So the United States, contrary to what many people think, does have some blood on its hands.
yes.
And it's this general here that convinced me on the interview on Worldview Weekend. How did you pronounce that? McElerney?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Well, where is it? Yeah.
McInerney. There we go.
McElerney.
I think it's pronounced McInerney.
Is that an I?
Yes. Let's
Well,
go
then
with
it's an
that.
I. Let's go with that. McInerney.
And if you listen to his testimony, he's a 3-star general. I don't know why he would lie about this. I don't know how it would help him to lie about this. It's his testimony that to me is very cogent and really caused me to attach credibility to this. And this would explain an awful lot. It would explain why the Democrats say things like, "We don't need your vote." Why Trump is speaking in rallies filled with, I don't know how many tens of thousands of people show up to his rallies, and there's Joe Biden in a room where everybody's kind of sitting in circles, and it looks like maybe 15 or 20 are in the room. And why is it that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton in 2016 are so doggone lazy? And how they don't get out and push for that final vote the way Trump does as he crisscrosses the country. And I like what this article, I don't like it, but I appreciate what this article says here. This is the narrative trap that has been set by the treasonous mainstream media. So we've had fake polls for the last year or so, fake news, fake impeachment. Well, why not just also have a fake election?
Yeah.
I mean, everything else has been fake. Yeah. Let's have a fake election. And they're setting Trump up for being sour grapes. He wouldn't accept the results of the election. That's why they kept asking him prior to the election, are you going to accept the results?
Think about that.
Well, the reason is the results have already been determined by this hammer scorecard. There's another article from the AmericanReport.org by Mary Fanning and Alan Jones, dated October 31st, 2020. I believe you can also find this on Brandon House's website, Worldview Weekend. The title of it is "Biden is Using the Scorecard and the Hammer to Steal Another U.S. Presidential Election, just like Obama and Biden did in 2012. What does this article say? And this is our longest article, and with this we're close to finishing.
In February 2009, the Obama administration commandeered a powerful supercomputer system known as the Hammer. The Hammer includes an exploit application known as Scorecard that is capable of hacking into elections and stealing the vote, according to CIA contractor turned whistleblower Dennis Montgomery, who designed and built the Hammer. He probably should know something about it then, right?
Yes.
The whistleblower tapes confidential audio recordings released by the U.S. District Judge G. Murray Snow's courtroom in November 2015 revealed that Scorecard was deployed by the Obama team against Florida election computers to steal the 2012 election, presidential election, on behalf of President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. So there's no question that it exists.
Right.
I mean, there it is. Scorecard is now being activated to steal the vote on behalf of Joe Biden once again. Biden utilized the hammer and scorecard while running for vice president in 2012. Votes are again being stolen on Joe Biden's behalf as he runs for the president of the United States in 2020. This time, scorecard is stealing votes. See if this sounds familiar. In Florida, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, according to Montgomery. Scorecard steals elections by tampering with the computers at the transfer points of state election computer systems and outside third-party election data vaults as votes are being transferred. The Obama White House had an encrypted VPN in order to access the hammer, wait for it, at will. In August 2015, CIA contractor turned whistleblower Dennis L. Montgomery provided the FBI and the DOJ with evidence stored on 47 hard drives that implicates Robert Hunter Biden, son of former Vice President Joe Biden, in illegal activities, Montgomery states. Among the 6 million pages of documents stored on those 47 hard drives of electronic data that Montgomery turned over to the FBI were 10,000 pages of documents regarding Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, according to Montgomery. The 10,000 pages of documents regarding Hunter Biden and Joe Biden included videos and images. Going all the way back to 2003, Montgomery maintains the U.S. government continuously targeted Joe Biden and Hunter Biden with electronic surveillance via the hammer. On February 3, 2009, Brennan and Clapper moved the hammer to Fort Washington, Maryland, and began using the foreign surveillance system for domestic surveillance targeting President Obama's political enemies for blackmail and leverage. Montgomery, as a CIA contractor, worked for John Brennan and James Clapper. Montgomery became a whistleblower upon seeing firsthand how the Obama administration had turned the hammer against America. Montgomery received 2 limited immunity agreements from the DOJ and the FBI in exchange for evidence production and testimony. Montgomery originally designed and built the hammer in 2003 as a foreign surveillance system to protect America after 9/11. The hammer is the key to the coup, Admiral James A. Lyons, on his deathbed, speaking to his longtime friend, Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney, and this is what he has to say. They stole a super surveillance government tool for foreign surveillance, and they turned it against America and are using it to steal the presidential election of 2020. CIA contractor Dennis Montgomery built the hammer in 2003 as a foreign surveillance tool to keep America safe from terrorists after 9/11 and to protect U.S. troops on the battlefield. Robert Mueller's FBI provided the computers for the hammer. The hammer foreign surveillance system featured multiple echelons of safeguards and sign-offs, listen now, to prevent U.S. personnel up to and including the President of the United States from using the system for unlawful domestic surveillance. On February 3, 2009, 2 weeks after President Obama's inauguration, Brennan and Clapper moved the hammer to a secret CIA facility in Fort Washington, Maryland. After Dennis Montgomery saw that they had commandeered the hammer, foreign surveillance tool, and transformed it into a domestic surveillance system for blackmail and leverage, Montgomery became a whistleblower. In 2013, Dennis Montgomery alerted multiple officials in Washington, D.C. that the hammer was being used to conduct illegal domestic surveillance. Montgomery even sent faxes to President Obama and Vice President Biden to alert them about the ongoing illegal domestic surveillance. Brennan and Clapper used the hammer to spy on, you ready for this? Supreme Court Justice John Roberts.
Who?
Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. But we're not done. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. 156 Article 3 judges, FISA Court Presiding Judge Reggie Walton, members of Congress, Wall Street executives, Rudy Giuliani, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Donald Trump, Trump Tower, multiple Trump businesses, and members of the Trump family. Brennan and Clapper spied on Donald Trump because the CIA feared Trump. Brennan and Clapper wiretapped Donald Trump, quote, a zillion times, he said. Close quote. The Obama White House could access the hammer at will through an encrypted VPN. In August 2015, Dennis Montgomery, under a limited immunity agreement, provided FBI General Counsel James Baker and FBI Director, wait for it, James Comey, with 47 computer hard drives of evidence proving that Brennan and Clapper had used the hammer to conduct illegal domestic surveillance, including on the 47 hard drives was, again, 10,000 pages of documents regarding Hunter Biden. In December 2015, Dennis Montgomery, under a second limited immunity agreement, provided the FBI and the DOJ with sworn testimony about the hammer and the contents of the 47 hard drives. And the hammer framework could throw multiple exploit applications. The Obama team used a hammer application called Scorecard to steal the 2012 election, a presidential election in Florida. And the last bullet point says the Biden campaign is using Scorecard to steal the 2020 presidential election, and they have not turned off the hammer.
All right. So Montgomery's the creator. McInerney, how do you say that? McInerney. I apologize,
Sorry,
sir,
Mac.
for mispronouncing your name. You deserve respect for serving our country.
General Mac, how about that?
General Mac. I guess they were fine with it as long as it was being used for the purpose for which it was designed. The problem is it became a tool that the administration could access at will, the Obama administration, to swing in an election. And the fact of the matter is it's being used, according to this testimony here, to swing the current election. Which would explain why Biden spent so much time in his basement and why Hillary Clinton, basically in 2016, didn't really do any active campaigning towards the last couple of weeks. You know, you compare her activity and Biden's activity to what Trump did, where he actually went out and tried to connect with the American people. I mean, why connect with the American people if they've got the hammer and the scorecard on their side, which can technologically throw the election in their direction?
It's so very interesting because I very vividly remember just a few weeks back where the news media outlets were criticizing Biden because he wasn't doing anything.
That's right.
Well, gee.
And the part of it also that's very interesting to me is Brennan and Clapper used the hammer to spy on Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. John Roberts, a Bush appointee, has been an enigma to me because he keeps siding with the left in decision after decision after decision. And he was billed to us as a conservative, strict constructionist. Why has he shifted? Well, could it be they have something on him?
Well, sure could be possible.
And they've got the guy over a barrel.
Could be.
So, I can't say categorically that such a thing exists. I am persuaded by the testimony of our General Mac, as we call him. I don't know why he would lie about it. His testimony to me is very credible. But if such a thing does exist, it would explain an awful lot, wouldn't it?
It would.
Jim?
It would. Yes.
And it shows us that we're really in a lot of trouble in this country if all of these things are true. We don't really have a clean election system.
No.
So the election is being compromised at every level. First of all, in Michigan, Pennsylvania, in those blue districts where the count, in quotations, is taking place. In Arizona, which was called, way too early, and you throw in this hammer scorecard, and you can see, why you go to bed thinking your candidate is winning, and you wake up and his lead has suddenly evaporated.
Well, we in every election that I can remember, and I can remember a few of them, we've always had these spontaneous resurrections of dead people voting, and we've seen that. But this goes way beyond anything like that.
Yeah. And I believe this, Brother Jim, that Donald Trump is such a threat to the New World Order that this is really their last stop, their last push to get rid of this guy.
I honestly think that they hate him probably first and foremost because he is not a politician and he doesn't play ball.
Yeah.
So, they haven't liked him from the beginning.
Exactly. Well, what do we do? And we're good at describing the problem. We're probably not as good as describing what to do. But here's a quote from the AmericanMind.org. I think they're quoting here a group called the Revolver. This is by Michael Anton, November 4th, 2020. The title of the article is Game On for the Coup. It will go according to plan unless we stop it. And they have 4 action points. Number 1, challenge the late night fines in the courts. Number 2, hold rallies in contested states. That's why I appreciated that crowd there in Michigan.
Yeah.
Showing
the
up.
protesters.
Yeah, the protesters saying stop the vote. Number 3, urge GOP officials in close states to expose the shenanigans and, if necessary, to refuse to seat Biden electors in the event of a fake count. I hope the consciences of the electors in our electoral college will kick in and see that this is not a real vote count that's happening. And then number 4, mount a campaign to marshal grassroots public opinion in the president's favor. I would add number 5, educate. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to educate people and make people aware of what is actually happening. And of course, not the least of which we should be doing is praying.
Yes.
And I believe that our prayers during this time can really alter things.
I do too.
When things look impossible, God has a way of showing up. God inhabits the praises of his people. Can you remind us what James 5:16 through 18 says?
I'm glad to do so. James 5:16 through 18. The effective prayer of a righteous man or woman can accomplish much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Then he prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit.
So the prayers are powerful.
They are.
Our prayers can even alter the weather,
Yes.
alter meteorology. And Elijah was a man just like us.
That's what it says.
And yet he prayed and God acted. We have another passage, 1 Timothy 2:1 through 4.
1 Timothy 2:1 through 4. First of all, then, I urge that entreaties and prayers, petitions and thanksgivings be made on behalf of all men, for kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth.
And here we're specifically told to pray for kings and all who are in authority.
Sure are.
Why? So that we can live a quiet and tranquil life, kind of like what we're not experiencing right now in the United States.
Yeah.
And this is good, and that we pray this way. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, and it actually has an implication for the gospel.
Yes.
Because verse 4 goes on and describes the gospel and says God desires all men to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. Don't underestimate what our prayers in these types of impossible circumstances can accomplish. And so, Brother Jim, sort of by way of conclusion, I want to leave people with a divine perspective on this, because you look at these illegalities, irregularities, out of control software, and you start to feel like, what can we do? It's impossible.
Yeah.
Well, as the Bible says, there's nothing impossible for the Lord.
That's exactly right.
What's impossible for man is not impossible for God. And how does God look upon this? How does he look upon a coup d'etat like this? How does he look upon the plots of the New World Order and fake news media to dethrone a lawfully elected president? We have Psalm 2, verses 1 through 4, written, 3,000 years ago by David. And what does David say there?
Psalm 2, 1 through 4. Why are the nations in an uproar, and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them.
So as the kings of the earth take their stand and are involved in their last days conspiracy, and we look at that conspiracy and we're overwhelmed by it, I mean, God just laughs at it. It's absolutely hilarious to him. And so keep that in mind as you feel overwhelmed today, no doubt, by some of these news items. And also keep in mind where our true hope is.
Yes. Amen.
Where does our true hope come from, Brother Jim?
Titus 2:13 from the Word of God, and it says the following: looking for that blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
So a couple of news items just came in as we were talking. Here's one news item from the Daily Wire. Michigan GOP claims software glitch switched 6,000 Republican votes to Democrat. And 47 countries use the exact same software. So that's just
surprise.
That's just more of the same. These glitches seem to never go in the favor of the Republicans.
Don't you hate those glitches?
And then we had a few comments and questions came in, which we could do this very fast. One person says the Senate race is not over yet, so how can we be sure that their agenda can't be passed? Well, we gave those 4 parts earlier. One person says COVID-19 impacted the election and was used by the deep state to get Trump out of office, and that's absolutely correct. COVID-19 has been used to bring in a global reset, including how voting is done. And now we're using a form of voting which is now open to fraud. And we've covered that, I think, maybe 6 months ago on one of our PPOVs. Another one says I think she's speaking here of Trump, exposed all of the corruption, but no negative consequences have happened to those who committed it. With him out of office, it will continue to get swept under the rug with the rest of their corruption. Not only will it get swept under the rug, we won't even know about 99% of the corruption with him out of office. Another person says this election was worse than any in Croatia, and we are a banana republic. So tragic for the USA. Another person says state legislators must prosecute all kinds of fraud quickly and to the full extent of the law. Amen. Another person says, Andy, as an attorney, are you able to address why they can't be arrested for breaking the law? Well, I just think it's a matter of where there's a will, there's a way. If you get the authorities wanting to arrest these people, they'll do it. Another person says, if this evil isn't stopped, no one in the USA or any country can trust the election process ever again. That's something I'm very concerned about.
Yeah, should be.
Another person says, didn't understand why Biden wasn't campaigning until the last few days. Figured he was just too old and ignorant, honestly. Well, I think he is too old. I think he is too ignorant. But there's a reason he's been propped up into that position. They don't need a high-energy guy. When they've got a computer program or software, hammer scorecard that can swing things at the last minute. Another person says, I heard Steve Bannon and Sidney Powell talk about the hammer. They knew about it a while ago, and Sidney Powell said they were putting a stop to it. Doesn't sound like they put a stop to anything, in my opinion. And finally, someone says maybe that's why Roberts has turned, referring to Hammer watching Justice Roberts. It would certainly explain a lot of his... he's supposed to be a conservative. I think he came up through the Ronald Reagan DOJ, if I'm not mistaken. Explain his turncoat philosophy.
Yeah.
All right, Brother Jim, as we close, any concluding thoughts?
I would just say pray for those in our government to get a backbone and to stand up and do what's right. That's the real problem. It's not that they can't prosecute some of these people. It's nobody has the will. They need to get the will to do what's right.
That's exactly right. And do us a favor, folks, if you agree with, what am I trying to say? The necessity for a message like this, just do us a favor and hit share on Facebook. And we're going to have this presentation, Lord willing, uploaded onto YouTube any moment. And sign up for our YouTube channel if you would. Click the notification thing and then the bell for a free subscription. Every time we upload something, you'll receive a notification. And what other thing do we have? I guess we're done. All right.
I guess so.
And at this time, we'll sign off. God bless you.
Bless
God
your
bless the United States of America, and pray for our country.
Keep looking up.